Bunnies, Easter eggs, wildflowers, oh my. Today we're painting all things Easter and spring. You'll learn beginner techniques to paint a fluffy bunny and feel the nostalgia by customizing your Easter eggs. Let's hop right in. So the first step of this painting is we're gonna paint in a really beautiful mint green background. Now I've created this mint color using a little bit of dark green, yellow, and a little bit of white, like that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab it on my brush and I'm gonna apply it at the bottom of my canvas using these back and forth strokes. And I'm not being too careful here with making it like these seamless blends. I actually want it to be a little bit streaky. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna pick up white on my brush and I'm not cleaning it off because again, I want like kind of like a streaky, rustic background. So it's gonna be a little bit darker at the bottom and then it's gonna get lighter towards the top of the canvas. And that's gonna give us that illusion that there's a little bit of grass at the bottom where our bunny and our eggs are going to be sitting on. And I even grabbed a little bit of yellow on my brush by accident, but we're gonna go with it. And then when you're happy with the background, we're gonna let it dry before moving on to the next step. All right, so the next step is I'm gonna transfer the bunny and egg design onto my canvas using some graphite paper. All right, so the next step is I'm gonna grab a little bit of brown paint on my small round brush and I'm going to start filling in the bunny rabbit. So I'm going to keep the top of the bunny rabbit's head with a darker brown paint. And then in a later step, we're going to fill in the bottom portion with a lighter paint. And that's gonna give us a little bit of variation in this bunny's coloring. And we just wanna fill it in with, it could be streaky, it doesn't have to be completely smooth here. We just wanna block in a dark brown color to start out with. I always find that stencils takes the stress out of painting, especially with complicated subject matters like bunnies and animals, because you're not worried about having to learn how to draw and paint at the same time, right? And while we're here, we're also going to color in the bottom or the body of our bunny rabbit with that dark brown color too. So once you're done with the dark brown portion, we're going to create a lighter brown. So I'm gonna pick up a little bit of dark brown in another pile and add in a little bit of white there. And we want it to be kind of like a medium brown. So not quite dark, but not totally light, somewhere in between. Kind of like the Goldilocks of brown. And then we're just gonna fill in the rest of our bunny's face with that medium brown color. And here I'm paying attention to the eyes and the nose and the mouth. I'm gonna try to work around them so then it's just easier to paint in the later step. Doesn't have to be perfect here, but just try to preserve as much of the eyes and the nose as you can. And this is gonna give our bunny a really cool two-toned look. And it's gonna help create those shadows too. Those variations in shadows in the fur. Fur or hair. I'm not sure which one bunnies have. And it's okay if it kind of blends in the middle right there. And I think I'm gonna cover the mouth. It's kind of hard to preserve just the line there, so we'll come back in the later step and we'll just paint that in freehand. We gotta believe sometimes we can do it. Cute little bunny chin. All right. Now, while we wait for the brown to dry on the bunny, we're gonna move over to the ears, the inner ears of our bunny, and work on those. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up some pink paint and I'm just gonna apply it to the middle portion of that ear with these little strokes like that. Not doing the whole way. I'm not going all the way to the top and bottom. I'm just focusing on the middle portion with these kind of streaky strokes. And then what I'm gonna do is, without cleaning off my brush, I'm gonna grab some white paint and then paint these strokes going downwards. And what that's gonna do, it's gonna create this kind of gradient, streaky look where it's darker in the middle and then lighter on both sides. And then I'm gonna repeat on the other bunny ear too. And it's okay if that pink and that white mix, that's kind of the look we're going for. All right, once we're done the inner ears, we're gonna see if our paint is dry. And mine is still wet, it's still a little bit tacky. So I'm gonna leave it to dry, and then I'm gonna show you in the next step of how to add really cool texture detail to our bunny. Now to add texture to our bunny, I'm grabbing the smallest detailing brush I have on hand because that's really gonna help create that fur-like texture. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up that original medium brown that we used for the bottom portion of our bunny. And I've watered it down a little bit with water as well to make it a nice soupy consistency. Okay, so what we wanna do is we wanna create these upward strokes like that, starting at that nose and working upwards towards the top of the head, just like that. And then these hairs are gonna curve slightly to the right, and these hair on this side is going to curve towards the left like that. And then we can create a couple of them going on the top of the head as well. And then we're gonna do the same thing on our bunny's ears. And we wanna be mindful here not to cover all of that dark brown below, because that's what's gonna give this bunny dimension. And then I'm gonna do the other ear too. Just like that. There we go. Now we're gonna add detail to the bottom portion of our bunny. So here we're gonna create an even lighter brown. So I'm gonna grab a little bit of white and a smidgen of that dark brown and create kind of a beige, I would say. And then when you have that beige color, we're going to add our texture to the bottom portion. So we're just gonna use these outward strokes. And then right above the eye, we're gonna come outside of that stencil a little bit to create this fur that's kind of fluffy at the side of our bunny. So this is kind of like painting outside the lines. So a couple of key things here is that you want to make sure that the strokes that you're painting at the top of the cheek are curved downwards, kind of like an arch in a rainbow. And then as you move your way down the cheek, then those strokes are going to flip upside down, kind of like the shape of a boat. And what that's going to do, it's going to give the illusion that it's a nice rounded cheek, and it's going to give it extra dimension and shape. And another thing here is to keep with that nice fluffy bunny feel, you want to paint outside the lines. So don't be shy here and take your strokes and whisk them outside of that original shape below. And then you're just going to repeat that on the other side of our bunny's face. And then where that dark brown meets that light brown, we're just gonna create some extra hairs so that those two areas kind of blend seamlessly. I'm gonna blend a little bit of that really light brown color right into that dark brown. Just right where they meet. We don't wanna cover all of it. Just like that. So for the chin of our bunny, we're gonna use that same light brown color, and we're just gonna give it a few strokes. Like that. And we're gonna leave that nose unpainted. Okay, perfect. Before we continue with the tutorial, I just want to quickly share that I've created some new merch for this channel, like this It's a Good Day to Make Some Art coffee mug, which I'm drinking my tea from today. So if you want to check them out, you can click on the store tab on my channel. All right, the next step is I'm gonna grab some of that medium brown paint we created in the last step, and we're gonna add some fur details to the body of our bunny. But we wanna make sure that we don't go all the way up to the top. So I'm kind of starting about 1 centimeter below, because what this is gonna do, it's going to create the illusion that there's a shadow. So there's gonna show a difference between the head and the body of our bunny. And we're just gonna use these fun swoop strokes to create the hairs of our bunny. So again, on the top, we're leaving kind of like 1 centimeter of that dark paint without this light brown on it. And I'm also going to make some of them purposely kind of come out of those lines on the side to give it the illusion that this is fur and this bunny is nice and fluffy. I'm gonna try not to cover all of that dark brown below, so we have a little bit of depth and dimension to that fur coat of our bunny. And I didn't know, but bunnies have fur and they have hairs. I was Googling that earlier because I wasn't so sure if bunnies had fur or hair, but they apparently have both. All right, while we wait for the body to dry, we're going to continue with the nose of the bunny. So I'm gonna use the same brush and I'm just gonna pick up a little bit of pink and we're just gonna fill in our cute little bunny nose. And then we're gonna give it a little bit more detail in a later step. For now, we're just gonna fill in the base of it with that pink. Okay, perfect. Now, my body is still drying, so we're going to continue with the eyes. So to do that, I'm gonna grab a little bit of black on my round brush, and I'm just gonna fill in the eyes. And since we painted around them in the first step, it's super easy peasy. 1 and 2. And I also watered down my paint and I thinned it down a bit with water just to make it easier to apply. All right, so while we wait for the eyes to dry, we're going to continue on with the nose. So as I mentioned before, we're gonna add a little bit more detail to our bunny nose. So we're gonna add a couple of nostrils, and then it's just gonna connect at the bottom. And then we're gonna give our bunny a nice, happy smile. Just like that. Okay, and then while we're here, we're gonna add a couple of dots with our black paint where the whiskers are gonna go in a later step. Like that. And then we're gonna repeat that on the other side too, to keep it equal-ish. There we go. So I made a mistake here with my paint, but I want to show you how easy it is to clean up your mistakes with acrylic paint. So I love using Q-tips, and what I'm going to do is while the paint is wet, I'm just going to wipe it. And I'm going to use a little bit of water, just like that. I'm going to dot it. Here we go. So the next step is the body of our bunny is nice and dry, so we're gonna add some more detail on that. So I'm grabbing the light brown paint that we created for the bottom portion of our bunny's face, and we're just gonna add some more of those curved swoopy lines to give a little bit more of a highlight on top of that fur. And we're just gonna do that on the whole body. And we're going to be mindful here not to cover all of our beautiful layers below. So we want to keep that dark brown, that medium brown, and now this light highlight brown on top. And I'm just using whatever leftover paint I have on my brush to create some more swoops. And this is kind of like a dry brushing method because you're not getting crisp strokes. You can kind of see below, the layers below. So I like to kind of just lightly go over it until all that paint is off my bristles. And I just want to troubleshoot something with you guys. So I noticed that the light brown I added here doesn't exactly match the light brown I added in the bottom portion of the bunny's face. So I created a slightly darker version and I'm just going to layer on top. And that's pretty much going to color match this brown with this brown over here. And we're gonna get a more uniform looking bunny. All right, now we're gonna focus on the leaves and foliage on below the eggs and also on the side of our bunny. So I've created 2 different versions of green here, a slightly darker one and then a lighter version. So I'm gonna take the slightly darker version and I'm just going to add some green leaves below those eggs. And they can just be like leaf-ish shapes. They don't have to look realistic here, because at the bottom of the eggs, we just want to mimic a little bit of darker shadow. And some of the green can even overlap into the egg. That's why we're painting it right now, because when we color over the eggs, you're not gonna see any of that green that kind of bleeds right into the egg shape. Add some on the sides. And then we're gonna grab some of that lighter green, and then we're gonna overlap some foliage at the bottom or leaves to give it just an extra dimension. I find with acrylic painting, the more colors and variations of colors you use, the more interesting your painting looks. All right. So now while we're here, we're gonna add our flower stems with that dark green paint and also the light green paint. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna water it down a little bit so it's nice and fluid. Like I mentioned in the earlier step, the more thinner your paint, the easier it is to make or to control it with your brush and to make those fine details. So I'm gonna pick some of that up with my smaller brush. And then I'm gonna start at the bottom. And then I'm just going to make these kind of loose stem shapes. They can be going in different directions. And I also find with myself, if I hold my wrist with my other hand, I get a little bit more stability with my stroke. And sometimes it also helps to go a little bit faster. You get a little bit more natural looking strokes and lines when you go a tad faster. And if you find you can't see the green because our background is also green, you can go ahead and add a darker, add a little bit more darker color to it, even brown. So if you find your color is a little bit too bright also, brown tones it beautifully. All right, now we're gonna add details to our eyes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab the back of a paintbrush and dip it in some white paint. And then I'm gonna add a dot on either eye, like that. And then my daughter actually taught me a really nifty trick of bringing these eyes even more to life. And you add a second smaller dot right below the bigger one. And it just adds an extra zing to the eyes. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're going to take some white paint. Now I'm using a paint marker here, but you can also use white paint with a small detailing brush. And we're just gonna outline the inner rim of the eyes. And that's really gonna make it pop against that fur. Just like that. And then we're gonna do the same thing on the other eye. Like that. And then we're going to take black and we're gonna add some really fun eyelashes to our bunny. So just a couple of eyelashes like that. And I always find the left side is always harder for me because I'm right-handed, but you're just gonna do your best and add three eyelashes like that. All right, and now we're going to add some whiskers to our bunny. So again, I'm using a paint marker, but you can also use black paint with a fine detailing brush. So for the whiskers, you want to be nice and loose here. And I like to start where we created those dots. And I'm just going to swoop out like that. Just maybe 3 or 4. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And sometimes one side is easier than another. You can kind of take a step back and then equal them out if you want. All right, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some wildflowers to our background. So I have an assortment of beautiful pastel colors. I have a purple, a yellow, a pink, and a nice light red. So just have fun here and add flowers of different shapes, different sizes. Some of them actually don't have to necessarily look like flowers either. They can kind of look like blobs because once you fill them in with color, it's all gonna come to life and really pop. But that being said, if flowers are stressing you out, we do not want you to be stressed out. So you can actually use the free stencil that's in the description of this video and trace in your flowers, and then just easy peasy, just color them in with your paint. And then in the next step, we're gonna have some fun with our Easter eggs. Now we're gonna have fun and paint in our Easter eggs. So I'm gonna be using pink to start out with, and I'm just going to paint in that Easter egg shape. This is going to be really fun because you're gonna get to customize your own Easter egg with whichever pattern you want to paint it with. All right, so once you're done the pink, you're gonna pick up some yellow paint. And the trick here with yellow paint is it goes on a little bit translucent. So what I like to do is I like to pick up a little bit of white and mix it in with that yellow, so it becomes slightly more opaque. But you can always just layer on top of yellow too. Let it dry and then add another layer to really make the yellow pop. Okay. And then we're going to pick up some blue or turquoise, and we're gonna paint in our final Easter egg on the left-hand side. And I wanna add a little bit of depth and dimension to these eggs. They look a little bit flat right now. So before the paint dries, I'm gonna pick up some white and we're gonna add some highlights. We're gonna blend it right into the base color on the left-hand side. Okay. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with the yellow one. Okay, pick up a little bit of white and blend it with that yellow below to just make it look like it's nice and rounded and not so flat. And then we're gonna leave the right side of the egg a little bit darker, just to show that it's casting a little bit of shadow on the other side. And then with our turquoise, same thing. Okay. So before we add the patterns to our eggs, we're gonna leave them to dry. Once your eggs are dry to the touch, now we're gonna customize them with whatever patterns you wanna add on your eggs. So if you're feeling nostalgic and you remember some patterns that you used to make as a kid on your painted Easter eggs, then you can go ahead and make those patterns, or you can follow along with me. So for this pink egg, I'm going to choose white polka dots on top. And I'm gonna show you a really nifty way of adding really perfect circles or polka dots is just by using the back handle of your paintbrush, dipping it in some white paint, and then dotting it down. So I'm gonna add 3 or 4 big polka dots here. That, and then I'm gonna pick up a smaller paintbrush because that's gonna give me smaller polka dots. And then I'm gonna fill in the rest of it with these tiny polka dots. It just gives it a little bit more variety. And then for the center one, I'm going to pick up my detailing brush and some pink paint, because pink and yellow is one of my favorite combinations. So for this one, we're gonna do that infamous zigzag pattern. That all the way down. And then we're gonna add a little zing to this pattern once we're finished the zigzags. And the zing we're gonna add is little polka dots. So I'm gonna flip over my brush like we did in this one, and I'm gonna dip it in that pink paint, and I'm gonna add polka dots between the zigzags to give it just an extra oomph. Do you have a favorite pattern that you used to make on your Easter eggs? If you do, let me know in the description below. Okay, so now for the final teal egg, I'm going to keep my detailing brush and I'm gonna pick up some orange paint, because orange and turquoise is also another awesome combination. And for this one, I'm gonna paint kind of diagonal-ish swooping lines that go down the side of the egg. They're not horizontal, they're kind of diagonal. And then we'll add a little bit more detail to this one once we're done these diagonal lines. See how the turquoise just pops against that orange? All right, I'm just gonna take my white paint and I'm gonna outline the orange stripes. And that's just going to make them pop even more and give it a really nice look. Yeah, I really like that. So I'm gonna do the same thing with this pink design. And you're not gonna see it so much against the yellow, but it's still going to give a really cool effect. If you want another easy spring painting to get hoppity with, then check out my lavender Q-tip painting tutorial. And if you like this tutorial, please consider subscribing to my channel. And as always, sending you lots of peace, love, and color your way.